Do you like scouting?
Oh, dude. Isn't scouting one of the things I'm going to go hang some flags, I'm going to go have a look-see. I think it's one of my favorite things personally to go do.
Why?
Because I'm independent. I feel like I'm doing something that is for the benefit of the crew or the people behind me or whatever. I feel like I'm gathering SA. I'm getting a better picture of what's happening, and you're not generally swinging a tool when you're scouting. This is the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center podcast. I'm Alex Victora, Assistant Center Director of the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center here in sunny Tucson, Arizona. This week we're coming to you with a discussion Travis and I recorded a couple weeks ago now about scouting. Wildland fire scouting. When you don't know what your fire's doing, use scouts. It's high-risk stuff. Stay tuned. Okay, back to the discussion. Travis and I were chatting about scouting. Why do we do it? Why do we like it? Why do we need it? Some of those things. Talking about some of these pressures, some of these conditions we operate in when we do something like scout on a wildland fire. Understanding some of those things and talking about it is, we hope, part of a conversation about something basic, something fairly basic like scouting that is probably deceivingly risky. And we've got some data, we've got some examples to chat about. And this is a conversation about much more than scouting. Scouting is the central topic, but Travis just drops nugget after nugget, gem after gem, and things like entrapments and social stigma around using shelters and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So this is more than about scouting. So back to the discussion. As you probably don't remember, maybe you do, I didn't. I was chatting about why I like scouting. I like scouting because... I think there's a cerebral part of it that I appreciate. We're thinking about what we're going to do, where we're going to go, where we're going to... if we're building line or if we're just thinking about contingencies or whatever, I like the thinking aspect of it. And I, in all honesty, never really thought much about how much and what percentage of the time people, or me for that matter, is kind of hanging it out there.
When you're scouting, do you always think, like, right before you leave, do you say, okay, here is my personal LCES? No, honestly, I think no, because I've spent personally a lot of time walking around in the green, sometimes close to fire, within a mile or a couple of miles, but lots of times so far from fires that I'm not even thinking about the fire. I'm thinking about, all right, is there a value at risk out here? Is there something to protect? And if so, what do we need to do that job? You could call that complacency, or you could call that lack of situation awareness. There's a lot of... Or you could call it normal.
Yeah, exactly.
I've made sure that, like, the squad or the crew is all dialed, and they damn sure better have their LCE, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And then just walk the other direction and completely ignore it for myself.
Which is an ironic thing, because they may well be literally 1 foot in the black. So they may be more well taken care of compared to you when you're off again.
I'm actually taking on more exposure. And then as a division or task force leader, when are you not?
Yeah. Hey, let's see what's down this road.
Yeah.
Let's have a look out here. Yep.
It's like, when are you not scouting?
Right, exactly. And how many, if you're to go through the watch outs, the fire orders, unburned fuel between you and the fire, are you actually really, able to see or know what your fire is doing at all times? We could use the checklist and beat up scouts pretty hard.
Yeah, but it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun.
I remember that being like the most exciting thing after getting qualified as a single resource. I got my crew boss done, and then it was all of a sudden it was like, I'm free of this burden of other people. Sure. Like I can go do stuff on my own.
Right.
I actually remember that getting, now as I look back on it, it's totally an entrapment. I've been entrapped a lot more times than is socially acceptable to admit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's partly because of our twisted sense of entrapments. But I remember it wasn't that long after I was qualified as a crew boss, and I was going to be the lookout. And it was actually, it was in California, it was at Yosemite, and I was just going to go get on this rock knob, this good spot to check it out. And I was super stoked because I was qualified to do it, and I went out there, and in the afternoon, the fire made a kind of a surprising run. It wasn't at me, but it just totally cut me off from, my plan, which was to go back to where everybody else was working. And it was just real clear. Oh, okay, well, I'm stuck here. And then I spent the next hour or longer just burning my spot out. You know what I mean? And it was totally unplanned, but I adapted and made, and it was actually fun. It's one of the more fun things that you can do is by yourself burning out your little, and there wasn't a real urgency to it or anything like that, but by the books is totally an entrapment. And I was out serving as a lookout, which I don't know, is that a form of scouting or not?
Sure. Yeah, right.
But it's textbook in terms of the exposure that we take on when we scout. By the numbers, scouting is high exposure time for entrapments and for other things too. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of times when you're scouting, there's still potential for all kinds of bad things to happen. It's just that the mitigations are a lot harder now.
Right.
The response to a bad thing happening. Just because you're alone. If you get hit by a tree, that's harder because now people have to find you.
Right.
If you fall down and break your leg,
right.
It's just the nature of being alone. It just makes recovering from any sort of mishap that much harder.
Right. Are we maybe misleading ourselves a little bit because the folks that we tend to assign those duties, well, I suppose they fall into a couple of different categories, right? Lookouts can be the kid who's got the turned ankle, which is just highlights some of that stuff you're just talking about. Is sometimes we put folks in lookout positions because they're broken, or
which is efficient. There's nothing wrong with that if they're
hey, we've got
capable or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Situation to situation, it can be fine. But then in terms of the people who are out again, hanging flags, looking at the next ridge, whatever the case is, those folks tend to be experienced to one extent or another, and for better or worse, they have a sense of what's normal work. They have normalized, potentially a whole bunch of different things. Being comfortable being away from the black.
Oh, you mean the Devil's Den fire? The Sawtooth fire?
Mm-hmm. And recently here, the Frog Fire.
Yeah. People that are dialed.
Right. Exactly right.
Those are dialed. They know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it still happens.
Yep. In each of those cases you just mentioned, Devil's Den in Utah, 2006. Spencer Coyle was, I think, acting duty officer and, task force qualified, a lot of time in, by all accounts, very experienced, professional, solid firefighter. Sawtooth, give us some Sawtooth details. This is one of these ones that we don't know. People don't know the story of Sawtooth.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Number one, it didn't happen in Idaho. Right?
Yeah, it was a prescribed fire in Arizona. 2003. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, around here, legendary firefighter, Rick Lupe, just was going to go... It's very similar, actually, to Devil's Den. He was going to go down and check something out. Ended up getting entrapped and overrun by fire. Mm-hmm. And it was just the alarming thing about it is it's the last person you would ever expect that to happen, just because of their almost legendary status in terms of firefighter, fire knowledge.
Mm-hmm. If Rick Lupe says, "Hey, I'm going to go down here and just have a look-see," that doesn't raise alarm bells.
That means that it's perfectly fine to go do that.
Right, and good. We'd rather have Rick do that than Travis do that, or Alex.
There's nobody you'd rather have doing that.
Right.
And from all accounts, that's similar to Dave Rule. You know what I mean? He's dialed. He's
Frog Fire.
Away. Yeah. There's no doubt of his capability, and he's doing something that's just completely normal, man. It's an emerging fire. going from type 5 to 4. They're talking about it going from 4 to 3, and he's likely going to be the trainee, and so it makes perfect sense to go kind of walk around and get your eyes around, on the concerns. Like you said, are there values at risk out here? And we walk out and scout things out.
Yeah. What are we dealing with? We've codified that in the fire orders. Know what your fire is doing at all times.
At all times.
Right. So how do we do that? And I'm looking at some stuff here from the 1960s, post Loop Fire. The Loop Fire was in 1966, and some of the analysis response to the Loop Fire specifically talks about the need to improve scouting at all critical points. So this is not a new discussion, this discussion about scouting. So one of the things I want to think about and get people talking about is, okay, we know scouting is important, and scouts sometimes get in tight spots, and in those 3 cases at least that we mentioned, bad deal, ultimate bad deal. So folks who are scouting, what does their training need to look like? What are the kind of things they should be thinking about? What does the data we have say? Yeah, lay it down. What do you think?
Well, the first step when I think about it personally is, man, I can't even get to the point where I'm acknowledging that what I'm doing in scouting is literally accepting. Like, I'm not even conscious of the exposure that I am taking on. And that consciousness, I think, is, for me, is always the first step. Is just like, okay, what I'm about to do is dangerous.
Right. I am actively putting fuel between me and the fire.
Yeah. Those types of things. I've told you this story numerous times. I know about the first fire I went on after Yarnell, and I was crushed by Yarnell. I probably shouldn't even have been going on a fire, but I went out and ended up as a task force leader in Oregon somewhere, and was just gonna go take a look. There was this big firing show, like the big box option, and then there was somebody starting to squawk about, no, I think we could pick it up. And so, of course you want to go have a look yourself and come up with your own idea, because this is a big decision. Are we going to bite off this big chunk of ground, or are we going to expose a bunch of people to some rough line but have it be a good deal, a good catch?
Button it up a couple, 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm going to go check it out. And I start off driving. I'm by myself. I'm a task force leader, and I'm just going to go look at this thing. And the road starts in the black, right? But it eventually winds around, and it's in the green. But I wasn't even really thinking of it. I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. The black ends. I'm sure it loops back over and comes back, and I'm in this big loop that happens to be, it goes down, and it so happens to be mid-slope. And so now I'm mid-slope, and the brush is getting tall, and I'm literally mid-slope with the brush on either side above the pickup, and I hear it. I hear the fire, and I can't tell exactly where it's coming from. It's like the brush is so high, I have a pretty good idea, but there's possibilities of it coming from all different areas. And then I just hear somebody over the radio say, yeah, we're backing out. This thing's, it's starting to go. And in that moment, I thought about Yarnell, and I was just like, yeah, there was just all this discussion about how could you be caught in the green? How is it that, people were out in the green? And I was like, here I am. I'm going to be next. And it wasn't even conscious. I didn't realize I was even doing it until I was in it. I just got in the truck. I was just going to go drive and check this thing out. And all of a sudden, and I was able, like most instances, most people's moments like that, I just backed up to this little clearing and turned around, and it was no big deal. But yeah, it just illustrated to me how easily we can end up in that situation and have it be not conscious at all. So going back to your question about what's the takeaway? Man, if we could just get to that one step of, I am going to go scalp something. This is a dangerous mission.
Right.
This is how it all starts. They all start the same.
Right.
They all start the same.
Yep.
You start from a safe place, and you end up in a bad spot.
Right. Spencer, Rick, and Dave all thought, and had all done what they had done. The mission, the short walk, the hike. Those guys all went on. They'd done it before, and none of those three guys thought, okay, this is going to be the one.
Yeah.
No way. Or else they wouldn't have gone. That's
Sure.
pretty clear.
And they probably didn't even think, oh, we're really going to hang it out this time, but I think I can squeeze it.
Right.
I think I can get this. So there's literally, I was looking back at some of my stuff, my data, and I pulled out single person entrapments for 25 years of single person entrapments. There are pretty much three scenarios in which individuals are entrapped, not multiples. Can you guess at what those scenarios are?
Well, is it scouting? Scouting's got to be one.
Oh yeah, yeah. The most, the largest piece of the pie is scouting.
Yeah. Equipment.
Yeah, heavy equipment.
Heavy equipment operators, and then I wonder if Lookout shows up on that'd be my other guess, but maybe they kind of lumped with scouting.
I think I've lumped them with scouting. They weren't enough to be their own slice of the pie.
Okay.
I guess. Firing, literally people with drip torches in their hands.
Right.
Interior ignitions fairly regularly, right? I mean, you can get turned around, or somebody can box you in, or and you are playing with fire. It makes sense when you think about all these instances. Heavy equipment, that's just something that those folks get out in front, and they're by themselves.
Right.
Incidentally, if you're east of the Mississippi, man, and you are entrapped, chances are you either are driving a big piece of equipment or you have a drip torch in your hand.
Right.
It's pretty much it. And if you're out west and you got entrapped by yourself, you were probably scouting. Although the ignition stuff does happen as well, but and heavy equipment, but not to the extent that it does in the east.
Right.
In terms of numbers, those are the scouting is dang near 40% of single person entrapments.
Okay.
Which is huge.
Yeah. Is this data that we published a couple years ago?
No, this is separate. With the several years ago, 2012, it just happened to be a year where scouting was a big instance of entrapments. I think that was the year we had Pole Creek.
And remind folks what happened on Pole Creek.
The bucket ride.
Yeah.
All I need to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the ride in the Bambi bucket.
Yeah.
Pole Creek. Fire up in kind of eastern central Oregon, south of Bend, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there was other instances that year too. There was, I think it was a task force leader, somebody scouting on an ATV, entrapped, burned pretty bad. Some folks in Colorado and some of those real fast-moving fires are out checking some stuff. It was a big year for entrapments in general, and scouting was, in just that year, scouting was 22% of those entrapments / narrow escapes.
Right.
Scouting's a big deal, but I've never thought of it. It's not one of those like red flag scenarios or situations that I just wasn't brought up thinking that way. And by the time I got the ability to scout, I was overconfident.
Right. Yeah.
I was so excited about being able to do it.
Yeah.
The other times that I have been entrapped on prescribed fires, it was that same thing. I'm going to go look at something. And these are like real common scenarios that I now label as entrapment, because by textbook scenarios where your plan didn't work. Oh, I had to scramble a little bit. I had to duck and weave, or I had to, basically means that's an entrapment. And again, that's not socially acceptable to talk about, because entrapment pretty much means you're a bad firefighter, not literally, but socially.
Right. A pretty heavy stigma is associated with that term.
Absolutely. I mean, and we documented that with the resistance to use a fire shelter.
Yeah.
Like, logically, what if we take emotion out of it and all that other stuff? What sense does it make to be resistant to getting in a fire shelter?
Right.
If you're at the point where you're considering it, logically, what reason is there to resist it?
Right. Struggle to find one. Yeah.
Yet it happens all the time.
Right.
That hesitation or whatever. But anyway, the other times that I've found myself needing to scramble or whatever, it was either carrying a torch and having to bob and weave, or going in. I had one instance, which is just classic one of an ATV. I'm gonna go in there and check to see whether or not that piece has come together before we box it in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some pieces I wanted to come all the way together before we send fire
Mm-hmm.
through. You know what I mean? And my instructions are literally like, hey, don't close the box until I'm out, because this is my way out.
Mm-hmm.
And you get on the radio, copy from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And go do my work, and I turn around and damn it if it's not boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
And that one's an okay story to tell because it wasn't my fault.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's just those other bad people. Right. And they said copy on the radio, so then it's even better to talk about how awful they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those idiots did it.
Wasn't
you. Wasn't me.
It wasn't me, but just to again, that consciousness. I don't know how to trigger that in people to get people to say to themselves, this is dangerous. I am Division Soup, and I'm going to pretty much be entrapment material all day.
Right. So, we used to have line scouts in the system, and we don't anymore. Not officially, not as a standalone position in ops. We have field observers. They're more of a planning function, though. But what do you think about that notion? Is this a position that should be revived?
Well, I personally haven't crossed that threshold where everything that used to be is awesome.
Sure.
It seems like everybody gets there at some point.
Uh-huh.
Where we reminisce about the good old days, and as if entrapments and fatalities somehow didn't occur, and then it was, it's these new practices and this policy and hiring problems and all this new stuff is why bad things happen. And it's like, no, we've never had an era where there wasn't bad things happening. Mm-hmm. So I'm not convinced that the fact that we no longer have a line scout means that we somehow approach scouting differently.
Right.
Give me a few years, I'm sure I'll get there. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's an argument to be made that just having that position is indicative of a higher value placed on the utility and maybe even the danger associated with it. I can see somebody making that argument.
Right. We've got all kinds of different single resource types.
Sure.
You can be a heavy equipment boss, which is not the same thing as a crew boss, which is not the same thing as a firing boss, right? They're all single resources, but we recognize, good crew bosses might not know anything to be a good heavy equipment boss, vice versa.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know. I'm not convinced that we need to define the position or redefine or resurrect.
And I mean, I'm trying to recall an instance as a division supervisor where I was like, man, if I only had some line scouts.
Sure. But you've certainly been in a position, I bet, where you go, man, if the fobs come over to my piece, I specifically am going to send them to do 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and then they're going to tell me I work for plants. So don't tell me what.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to come in and ask me, hey, we're in your division. Is there anything you can look at? And I'm going to say, yeah, there is. And they go, oh, actually, sorry, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Because I've been that fobs plenty of times.
No, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, maybe there's some value in making it a separate function. I don't know.
Well, short of that, what again is the what's the mess? Is there a message beyond, or is that where we should start? It's just to get people to embrace.
Yeah,
hey, look, man, this is high risk stuff.
I mean, it's kind of a lame thing. It's a broken record. I feel like it's just like when I was struggling with the idea of be afraid to open the fuel tank on your chainsaw, and feeling like somehow that's lame advice.
Well, it kind of is in some way, because look, man, I open my fuel tank. But the response to that is, I open this fuel tank maybe hundreds or thousands of times.
Exactly. That's the point. That's why.
Right.
That's why you should be afraid of it.
Yes. because you are just, it's going to be a surprise.
Yeah.
Right.
And the more that you can build some sort of mechanism into acknowledging that, and there's tools, you know, it's like asking, is this flight necessary? Why is that on a checklist?
Yeah.
Why is that printed? Why is that something that people, and I mean, we've all gotten annoyed with the person that always uses the checklist, and they pull it out every time, and they always start their briefing the same way. You know what I mean? It's like the medical field struggles with this. How do you get doctors? How do you get surgeons to use a checklist?
Right.
Even though the data shows that
clearly
it doesn't eliminate, you know, missed steps. But man, you have a lot better chance of not missing steps if you use a checklist.
Right.
And you know, asking, is this flight necessary? That's a powerful question to begin every operation, every preparation for a flight or whatever, because we know that's a high exposure instance. And the same thing could be, that's what we're advocating when we say be afraid to open your fuel tank, is just like recognizing that this seemingly benign task has put people in the burn unit. That's all it is. It's just a reminder. We're not saying it's going to blow up in your face.
Right.
We're saying there's a potential for it.
Right.
And when it has happened in the past, it's been a really bad deal.
Right.
And so I don't know what the equivalent of that is for scouting, because it's just so much a part of how you're going to do the job if you're a task force leader or a division or a field observer for that matter.
Yeah. It's baked into the job.
Yeah.
You know, you will be out in the green. You may not be next to good safety zones. And your escape route might be a windy road, you know, beaten through the brush, you know, up some ridge or whatever.
And if I'm doing it, I haven't even thought about an escape route, because I'm just out there doing it.
Right.
I'm just going and taking a look. And so, I think language is important, being intentional about the way we phrase things. And I don't know that there's a specific instance where you can say, is this scout necessary? Or, you know, it's just, it doesn't make sense. But the more you try and think about it, and I appreciate it. I try to appreciate it when other people point it out to me. Sometimes it's hard to hear.
Hey man, I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah,
dude.
exactly. Yeah. Thanks, sport.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and really that's what a lot of these things are about, is this these conversations we have with each other, with ourselves internally, and then as a group. It's a conversation, again, whether it's the fuel geyser with the fuel tank. That's an internal dialogue, and we've heard some great stories this week about about those internal dialogues folks who've been burned have had about the potential for the fuel geyser, so there's clearly a conversation happening there, and maybe that's our first goal here with scouting, is have that conversation, that discussion with yourself, and then others around you, and be deliberate and let folks know, hey, I'm going to be out here. I'm going. Let's have that talk. You know, and maybe somebody will say, you know what, there's just no need actually at this point in time.
You know, if you go back to those initial attack, emerging incidents, just having those moments, and we say it to each other. We tell each other we care about each other a lot, but we don't say it that way. We say, yeah, man, be safe. Hey, keep one foot in the black.
Heads up out there.
Yeah, heads up out there. Keeping commo, whatever, you know what I mean? And we're saying, hey, I care about you. This is dangerous. But we're not saying that.
Right.
Especially in those moments of, you know, I can just imagine. That's what creeps me out about Frog, is that I can see it, so it's so normal. And in my mind, that initial attack, go in, fire, resources come in, just not quite enough, but you know, you could catch it, but maybe not. You just got a hose lay it, you know what I mean? All of that stuff is associated with really positive feelings within myself, positive experiences. Like, I love that moment. I love that time.
Right. Especially as a trainee, especially when it's your chance to get
it's your chance, and
a good one on your book. Yeah.
And it's just fun. That's the whole point. That's
boil it down.
I don't even care sometimes about what position I'm in. That's just fun. And to try and inject into that some sort of dark cloud about danger is just, that's hard. But shit, man, on the other side of that is a funeral, man. Like,
yeah.
So in getting back to the language, as somebody goes out there heading out to scout an emerging fire, say something.
Right.
And have it, and say something that's not normal.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Because one foot in the black, for the most part, just goes in one ear, out the other.
We've heard that.
As well-intentioned as that is.
It's lost its meaning.
And for Pete's sake, don't say be safe.
Well, that's good. And that's probably a good spot to wrap it up, because that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, stop me now.
Wow. So, what do you think about that? There's a lot there, huh? What does scouting mean to you? What does it mean to you now? What do you think about doing your next scouting mission? Will you do anything different? Will you sit and have that conversation either with folks you're going to scout for or simply with yourself? What else needs to be talked about as part of this conversation on scouting? What do we miss? What did we get wrong? Please let us know. Leave a comment. Send us an email. You can tweet us. You can send us a Facebook message. Heck, send us a postcard. And with that, you should know that the podcast is now in iTunes. Go over to iTunes if you get your podcast. If you do any business in iTunes, check us out. Just do a search for Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. Subscribe in iTunes. Leave a review in iTunes there. The reviews are important. That'll push us up the list a little bit there in the iTunes ecosystem. We're also in Google Play. If you have a Gmail account, a Google account, you've got an account in Google Play, believe it or not, and you can check out our podcasts and tons of other great podcasts inside of Google Play. Subscribe there inside of Google Play. And we're also in Stitcher. If you've never heard of Stitcher, it's just another spot to get your podcast. Any of those services, we're now available inside of. Of course, you can just check us out inside the Podbean. You get the Podbean app for your phone. And if you subscribe in any of those services, you'll get a ping, a notice, an email, a little notification on your smart device the second there's a new episode. So check us out on any of those services. Please subscribe, tell your friends, leave us a review, let us know what we got right and what we got wrong, and become part of the conversation here, whether it's on scouting or trapments or any of the things we talked about today, or anything that's on your mind for that matter. So with that, I'll sign off and say thanks a ton for your time. Hey, that music made me want to go surfing.